Hey there, and welcome to Get Career Curious, the podcast that gives you the inside scoop on careers, what it takes to get there, and what the job is really like. So what does a U.S. diplomat, a tech insider, and a leadership coach have in common? Well, they're all versions of today's guest, Kashia Dunner, whose career journey has been anything but linear. And that's exactly why you're going to love this episode. Kashia has pivoted through nonprofits, government, and tech, racked up awards in human rights, landed strategy roles at Twitter and Google, and now runs her own coaching business, helping people align their work with who they actually are. So whether you're exploring your first job or plotting your next big move, Kashia brings the honesty, warmth, and insight we all need. So let's get career curious with Kashia Dunner. Hi, Kashia. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about your career path and all the pivots and turns. Maybe start graduating high school. What did you want to be and start from there?
Oh, wow. You're going to take me back in the Wayback Machine.
I am.
Back in high school. So when I graduated high school, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. When I was a little girl, my grandma would basically say I'd be a great lawyer because I was very argumentative. I asked a lot of questions. So I went to undergrad thinking I was going to go to law school. I was pre-law track. And then I took my first political science. And at that point, I was like, oh, what's this? What's this? I like it over here. And I changed majors. I remember changing majors. My parents were so upset at me. And I was like, it's going to be okay. And throughout college, I did like model OAS, model UN, and I was really into like international development, that sort of area. I knew I wanted to do something international. I knew I wanted to help people. And when I graduated, I actually went into the nonprofit sector. I worked at Planned Parenthood, which isn't international, but still they have international arms. They're helping people. There are issues that I cared about, still care about. And then I was like, really making a lot of money. And even though I went to college, I still live at home. I don't like this. And I decided to go to graduate school. And that is where I got my master's in Latin American studies. I focused in economics and politics. And I actually got a fellowship through the State Department that paid for a substantial part of my graduate education. So when I graduated from grad school, I knew I had a job. I knew I was going into the Foreign Service. So my first grown-up job, my first real job was actually a diplomat, which is wild.
My dream job.
When I look back, I'm just like, I was so young and in charge of so much and so many big decisions. So I knew going into the Foreign Service that I wanted to work in places where I could have an impact. So all of my assignments were actually classified as hardship tours. I served in Caracas, Venezuela, Tijuana, Mexico, Erbil, Iraq, and San Salvador, El Salvador. And throughout that journey, what's unique about the Foreign Service is that you have different jobs. So yes, everyone's a diplomat, but everyone has a different job. So when I was in Venezuela, I was doing visa work. When I was in Mexico, I was doing American Citizen Services work. So things like jails, dead people, things like that. When I was in Iraq, I did human rights work, and that was my favorite work assignment. I earned the Human Rights Officer of the Year award there. I did really impactful work. And when I went to San Salvador, I focused on youth programs and youth entrepreneurship. So very windy path already, and we're still within the Foreign Service, but I hit a point of, this isn't quite what I want for my life. I started to get a bit wary of living my life in 2-year increments. Just felt very disjointed of like picking my life up every 2 years or every year and having to make all new friends, all new community, all new everything, being away from home. And yes, there's technology and visits, but I was hitting a point in my life. I went a little bit of stability. And there were also other things that just didn't feel aligned with where I was and where I wanted to be in my career. So I quit. Which is wild to say. Most people don't quit the Foreign Service. And I didn't have a plan. I just knew I didn't want to do that anymore. And from there, I went on to work at a college career center. And that is actually where I was first introduced to coaching and this whole secret way that people actually get jobs. Because I am a first generation college student and I was taught, work hard, make good grades, the work will speak for itself, you will be rewarded. And working in that career center taught me that's not actually how people get jobs. There's this whole other thing happening in addition to the good grades and the hard work. It is the networking, it is the events, it is the recruiting, it's all of these things that I didn't even know existed when I was in high school and college. So that kind of hit that spark of how can I show other people that this exists so that they can in their career and their job searches. And again, I have a military spouse, so we moved and I had to leave that job and I started my own business at that point and was doing more consulting than coaching. And then the pandemic happened. So everyone's trapped at home. People aren't really seeking coaching. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to corporate. I'm going to get a job. And what inspired me in that moment, if you remember, that is the time where we had these the hearings on the Hill for all of the tech companies. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching these hearings and I'm like, I could do that. I could prep them for that. Like I have policy experience. I'm up to date on technology. I'm really interested in how technology will impact policy, impact our lives. I want to work in tech. So that's what I did. I pivoted my career again. It took like 7 months. I'm always very transparent about that because I think often when people hear pivot your career that you can just start applying for the new job and then you get the new job because you're awesome. Yes, you're awesome. And it doesn't quite work that way. So it was 7 months of networking, informational interviews, rewriting and rewriting my resume and cover letters and asking for people to introduce me to people before I was able to transition into the tech sector, where I did do a policy related role in a tech-based nonprofit. And from there, I was recruited by Twitter to be their strategy and operations person for their policy team. So again, I'm getting to marry two things that I'm really good at, policy work and operational work. And now, I've made this transition not only to tech, but like big tech. And from Twitter, I did the same transition to Google and did another strategy and operations role and continued in that industry. But kind of that same feeling that I had when I was in the foreign service, like, I want something else. I want something else that feels like I'm able to make a bigger impact. As great as that work was, I knew I wanted to really be able to use the full range of my gifts and my talents. So I, from there, went back to my business and have really doubled down of making this full-time, scalable, and doing the things that I enjoy doing when it comes to coaching in the leadership, career, workplace space, and also consulting for operations, because a lot of companies, especially small ones or startups, need operations, but they can't afford to hire operations people. And that's where I come in.
So you do that on a project-based basis where you'll go into smaller and mid-sized companies and review their current operations and then make recommendations? Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's just nice for listeners to know consulting projects in general are time-bound and usually you don't go on full-time, but you join a team as an advisor. I personally find the work you did in public policy really interesting. So can you give an example of what you would work on in the public sector and then transition to how do you use that in the private sector with a corporation? Like, what are those transferable skills?
So, of course, it will depend on what you do, what agency you're in, et cetera. In my case, I did a wide range of work in the Foreign Service. So I had very strong writing skills. I was writing congressionally mandated reports, for example. I had very strong interpersonal skills, cultural competency, because I was going out and engaging in another culture in my second or third language. So those are all skills that I was able to, with a bit of work, translate to language that resonated in the private sector. So when I made that first jump from basically my government job to then the tech industry, I leaned heavily on a lot of the writing that I did, a lot of the relationship building, because it was a very relationship-based role. It was a policy role within tech. So I was basically using some of those same skills when I made that leap from public to private. Now, I think what's more interesting is actually the functional leap that I made from going from policy to strategy and operations, because that is a less clear line for a lot of people.
Okay. Yeah.
You often just would stay on a policy trajectory, but I learned in that first role that I am actually a fixer, an organizer, and how do we put structure around things? And being able to do that within a team that was policy driven is what helped me transition to Twitter. So when I was interviewing for that role, I focused heavily on the processes that I built, how I was able to manage and bring people together, how I was able to lead cross-functional efforts. And those are all skills that were important to Twitter in that role at that time. So I always encourage people to really think about what's the story, not necessarily what's the skill. What story are you telling with your career, and what do you want to be known for? What are your superpowers? What is your sparkle? And then you will be able to find out what skills will transfer to tell that story.
And what would you say to someone who's just maybe graduating college or is in college, seeking an internship, and they don't have much experience to draw on? What's some advice you could give about how to tell a good story?
Sure. I encourage every college student to utilize their college career center. They are so underutilized, and that is what they're there for. They're there to help you through that process. And your internship, I know it feels very serious when you're in college, but it really is a time for experimentation and to learn what you like and maybe what you don't like as much in terms of a job, a work culture, an industry. So I would encourage them to go in with curiosity. And when they go in, what do you want to get out of this experience? Yes, you are there to do great work. And what do you want to get out of this experience? How is it going to be a part of your larger career story? I don't expect people in college to have like a well thought out career story. What we need is actually more career curiosity, so that can avoid entering these career trajectories that, they look up at 25 or 30 and they're like, I didn't want to do this at all. How did I get here?
Yeah. And are those the type of people that you work with now?
I work with a few, how did I get here? But generally speaking, I work with people who are either feeling a bit stagnant in their career. So how do you get here, but kind of a remix of that? Also people who are either burned out or recovering from burnout, and they're looking for their next role with intention. Those are typically the types of clients that I work with.
So looking at your career, what made you decide to leave the corporate sector and to just really focus on your own business?
So many things. Big inhale. I have typically taken safe route, right? When I graduated from college, I had a job before I graduated, which was not the story of my peers. Like, I'm in the last quarter and it's like, all right, you have a job offer. So I was able to walk across that stage knowing that I was going to Planned Parenthood. Same thing when I graduated from grad school. I knew I was going into the Foreign Service. So I'm someone who's always taken very safe steps. And as I reflect on it in my years that I'm not going to disclose, but as I reflect on being safe, I also think about, was safe always aligned with what I wanted to do? Did safe always put me in the best place in terms of my own physical and mental well-being? Did safe always align me with living a life that I desire, not the life that I'm told I should live because I went to a fancy school and got fancy degrees? And really, my own burnout is what forced me into that. I went on FMLA last year. A lot of big life things happened. My sister was diagnosed with cancer. We moved across the world. Like, it was a lot, and I had a very demanding job. And it was like the first time in my life. I've been working since I was 14, but it was the first time in my life where I said, I'm out. I need a break. I can't do this anymore. And through that time off, it's really what got me reflecting of what energizes me. What do people ask me to do even when I'm in a corporate environment? And typically the things that I would get high praise for were being a strong communicator, bringing people together who maybe didn't want to come together, organizing things and bringing order to chaos, encouraging people and making them feel steady, through hard and uncertain times. Those are all things that I do as a coach. And for the record, I've been coaching on the side all of this time. So even though I had corporate role after corporate role, coaching was always the consistent. It was always the thing that brought me energy and joy. So I was like, I should just do that. I should just do that.
The thing that brings you energy and joy. Yeah.
So here we are.
Wow. So you really have been quite the go-getter. I mean, the fact you've had all these jobs and then did coaching on the side, that's really impressive. And what do you say to young people when they are maybe in a job that's probably not their dream job in terms of pursuing a side hustle or looking at some other options? What's your advice there?
Before we even get to side hustles and like pursuing the next thing, something that I remind people of, and I even remind myself of this, is that you always work for yourself. So no matter what corporate job or government job that I've always had, I work for Kashia Dunner Incorporated, which means I want to move in a way that aligns with my integrity and my values. I want to build relationships in a way that I feel is transformative and not transactional. I want to be the person at work where people are like, yeah, she's a joy to work with. So regardless of how I may have felt about a particular role in a particular moment, I would keep that in mind during the like hardest of hard times of like, yes, this is hard. It's your reputation that you're working for. So that's one piece. In terms of side hustles, I think they're much more common now than when I was starting my career and people were just like, I don't have a side hustle.
What are you talking about?
Where now, like, everyone has some sort of something, whether they publicly announce it or not. I would just encourage people to be very clear about the policies of their organization where they have their full-time job, particularly if they are in the US where their healthcare and other benefits are tied to their full-time job. We don't want to mess that up. So get clear on the policies because different industries, different companies have different rules and procedures when it comes to side hustles. For example, I worked in public corporations. It wasn't an issue. However, I did have to disclose it when I was hired, and it had to be approved by the legal office. When I worked in government, the rules were even more restricted, but it wasn't impossible, but you had to do the paperwork and get the approval. And I know some people breeze past that, and they don't think that it'll happen to them. Don't lose your main job over your side hustle if your side hustle can't replace your main job yet. So just follow the rules. I know it can be, it can seem like it's tedious, but do the right thing and it's fine. And think about in terms of like the other things of wanting to explore something different, kind of what I was expressing, get clear about your values in your season of life. Because what I wanted out of work when I was 25 is different from 30, it's different from 35, it'll be different from 60. Like it's just going to be different.
Yeah.
And accepting this, I call it a jungle gym, that your career isn't a ladder, it's a jungle gym. And different moments you're going to feel like climbing up and you've got tons of energy, and other times you want to climb down, you want to walk on the ground, you want it to be easy, you need to coast. That's okay. Just being aware of that and being able to seek opportunities that align with that season of life.
Yeah, that's fabulous advice. In terms of seasons of life and kind of growing and expanding, there's a lot of misconceptions or things people think of when you're an entrepreneur that, hey, it's so fun and it's very cool. But I think you and I both know there's some other things to think about. So what's your advice for someone who's like, I got a full-time job, I'm going to just leave it and be an entrepreneur? What are your thoughts there?
Marita, I think I have some really unpopular opinions on this topic. I would encourage you to think about what's driving you to entrepreneurship. So are you running toward it or are you running away from your job? Because if the answer is you're running away from your job, maybe pause. Let's take a breath. I'm not saying don't do it, but let's take a breath and really evaluate that, because entrepreneurship is hard. It's hard when it goes well. It's hard when it doesn't go well. It's just a different level of both responsibility, excitement, and stress than people often realize. I think a lot of people are drawn to entrepreneurship, frankly, because a lot of workplace cultures are very broken. So instead of really addressing the real problem of we have managers who haven't been properly trained, or who don't want to manage people, but they got a manager role. Or we have companies that have created such insecurity because of mass layoffs and things like that. You have people going, well, I'm just going to go work for myself. And I often say, that's fine. And how many people would actually be okay at their job if their job was healthy and functional? Let's fix that. Okay, fine. It's healthy and functional. You still want to be an entrepreneur. Great. A lot of people think that it's just, I want to be my own boss. I don't want people to tell me what to do. That's not how this works. Because even as an entrepreneur, you are accountable to people. You may not be accountable to your boss, but you're accountable to your client. You may not be accountable to your colleagues, but you're accountable to yourself. If you don't do it, or if you don't pay someone to do it, it's not getting done. And that is going to have an impact on your livelihood. So I want people to really start thinking through all of the pieces of what does being an entrepreneur mean? What does that look like for me? What support do I have? Like having a community, having support systems, having the financial resources, and being clear on your risk tolerance as well. How much risk are you going to take? Because it's not all an up trajectory. The pits and there are bumps, and often, getting through the pit and getting through the bump is where the next up happens. But often people are like, oh no, I'm out of here. So how much risk tolerance do you actually have? And being honest about that, I think, is also critical.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of ups and downs, but I feel like there's always little bumps in the road that you think should be simple, and stuff that you think's hard goes well. And then these little things are what takes so much time. And it's kind of often you do it your own shop. So going back to your career coaching lens, what advice would you give to someone who is graduating high school or early college and just exploring careers? Like, what advice do you have to that person so that they, don't rush into some decision or pick something because that's what their parents are suggesting and maybe it doesn't match or align with their values?
Yeah. And I mean, everyone has a different reality when it comes to that. I don't want to negate that some people's parents or other members of their community do have a very strong influence over what they are able to do or choose, because perhaps they are financially supporting them and saying, if you do something else, I won't financially support you, which is scary, especially right now. That being said, in high school and in college, what I wish I had done more of was just informational interviews and talking to people across industries and really understanding what it means to be a blank. What do you do every day? Like doing different shadowing. It doesn't even have to be, I think often we use the internship as the way to learn. I would encourage people to do just more job shadowing. And that doesn't have to be something formal. It is going to require you to get brave. And I say this as an introvert. So introverts, I empathize with you, and it's not an excuse. We have to get out here too and network and start meeting people and introducing ourselves. But also getting on LinkedIn, yes, in high school, yes, in college, because again, that's where you're going to start to meet people. For example, I'm from South Carolina. My parents didn't go to college. I was first gen. So I didn't have a network that I could go, hey, dad, introduce me to so-and-so, or mom, introduce me to so-and-so. And I also, at the time, didn't have the knowledge of well, how do I network? Whereas now I am very much of, hey, I'm Kashia. I do this. I see you do that. Can we have a coffee chat? Can we meet for lunch? Can we do something? And sometimes people don't answer. Sometimes people say no. And also people will say yes. So also getting your ego out of the way for when you ask the question, like, hey, can I shadow you, Dr. McDoctor Pants? Can I shadow you? If they don't answer, don't take it personally. Move on. Go to the next doctor. Go to the next one. Ask the next one. Getting comfortable with rejection. I know rejection sensitivity is something that's probably overused at this point. Don't let that be your blocker. Because everyone's busy. It doesn't have anything to do with you, but you need this information. You need that thing. So I often say to my clients, be a shark. Be a shark. Get out there and be a shark if you want it and if you're curious.
Yeah, and I see that a lot. People give up way too fast on making those connections and maybe just take the lens of maybe that person's just really busy and they didn't see your LinkedIn invitation.
Exactly. And I say that as someone who receives those as well from people who are earlier in their career. Like sometimes I'll see it, and if I don't respond right away, I miss it. The people who follow up, like, hey, Kashia, did you get that immediately? Because thank you for pushing it back up top. And also thank you for demonstrating a sustained interest. And people will tell you when to leave them alone. Like, I like to give it 3 touch points, depending on the type of person or type of client. So if I reach out to someone on LinkedIn, they don't respond. This actually happened to me last week. This is a great example. So I reached out to someone and they didn't respond. And my feelings were hurt. Like, you didn't respond to my message. What do you mean? And then we're in a different community together. And I sent them a separate message. And I was like, hey, I sent you a note on LinkedIn. Not sure if you're really active there, but would love to have coffee together just to learn a little bit more about, your coaching and what you do. And they're like, oh yeah, let's do it. And sent me a link right away. So we get creative is what I'm saying. Like, don't use one point of contact. Don't think it's about you. Be vulnerable and get creative.
And take the risk. I mean, even if you are an introvert, you just got to take the risk. Could you have done career shadowing when you were like in government job? Could you say, hey, my state representative or someone in public policy, you look them up. I mean, are those available to do a day of shadowing?
I won't speak for the now times. When I was in the public policy space, there were opportunities where like different offices would host students for a day. So it's less about you calling and saying, I want to do it. It's more getting in on that student day where they're going to have a group of 20. But that's still something. That's still more exposure than you would have had. A lot of the federal agencies, at least, they used to have shorter internship programs. So it wasn't like a full-on, like what you would do when you're in college, if maybe it's your whole semester or your whole year, but instead like 4 to 6 weeks, which I think is very reasonable and manageable to learn something and see something different. I think the shadowing piece is probably more effective in the private sector, particularly smaller businesses. Like I'm thinking of someone, I want to be a dentist, just talking to their local dentist, or I want to do this. I think that might be a bit easier. But again, you don't know if you don't ask. And often reaching out to people and saying, I'm interested in this career. I see you do this career. What are some ways that I could see this? Can we have an informational interview? Can you talk? If you can't shadow them, can they tell you? What does your average day look like? What does a good day look like? What does a bad day look like? What do you wish you would have known? Again, I'm a big believer in career ownership because no one is going to care about your career more than you because you have to live your life. So how do you want to take control of this process?
Speaking from my own experience, I was someone who loved a lot of things. So it was harder for me because I could be like, oh, I could see myself doing that, or I could see myself doing that. And it was hard for me to actually hone in on something for real. And what advice do you have someone who has too many interests or too many likes? Because that was actually my problem.
Oh, you're talking to someone I've stopped counting the career pivot at this point. Very relatable content. I think this is where the importance of getting fulfillment outside of work is also very important. So right at the brink of the pandemic, I went mega viral on Twitter for saying, I feel like our generation lost hobbies. Let's bring back hobbies in 2020, not knowing that we were all about to be trapped in our house to develop hobbies. So I often see that when people are looking for all of their fulfillment and joy to come from work is often when they feel the least fulfilled. I have a lot of interests. I have a lot of things that I enjoy. Those aren't necessarily things that I want to do for a living. Those aren't things that I want to do for money, but they are things that I need to do in order to feel satisfied. So I think a good first step is really distinguishing what it is you actually want to do for work and those varied interests versus what things that you like, but it's more of a weekend side hustle, hobby, that sort of situation. I think that's a really critical and important step one that people can take in terms of, okay, so we still have 8 things that I want to be, a zookeeper or a philanthropist and everything in between. I think that's where those informational interviews can be powerful because when I was transitioning from federal government to tech, I was convinced. I was like, I know I want to be on a policy team. this is what I want to do. It's what I've been doing. And I started doing informational interviews with people. I'm like, I don't want to do that. That actually does not sound like my ideal day. I like that it's your ideal day, but that's not for me. And as more people, I'm like, oh, I'm actually interested in that type of role in this industry or that type of company. So this is where the conversations are important, because you just don't know what you don't know. And just because something looks good on paper doesn't mean it's going to feel good in practice.
Right. Like you telling me your job was in foreign policy, that sounded to me like my dream job. However, I personally would not have liked doing the move every 2 years either. That's hard. And so I think had I looked into that, or if someone looks into that and is like, hey, that works perfect for me. I love moving a lot. I love seeing new countries. And maybe that works at a certain station of life. But then is this career viable later if I decide, no, you know what, I want to hunker down in one town and can I still keep my career? So those are the things maybe people should consider when they're looking at different, job shadowing or informational interviews. Some jobs transport and some jobs don't, and that is one nice thing about your current job is consulting and coaching allows you to do it from anywhere, typically.
But what's important to you in the moment, it's also a forcing function because, my husband's job doesn't have that flexibility. And every time we moved, I found myself, basically in this whole legal HR review of can my job move? And it becomes very exhausting because I still had to work through that. So I'm doing this very massive administrative process. I'm moving my life and I'm doing my very demanding job. It just gets to a point where I think we need to be honest in our careers and also say, which pain do I choose in this moment? So the pain that I choose is the roller coaster ride of entrepreneurship because it gives me other things that I want. Now, would I have wanted this pain when I was younger and maybe didn't have the same financial viability, the same network? And that's another important thing about entrepreneurship. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. What work experience do you have? What network do you have to go do the thing? I started my coaching business in 2019. It didn't go well because I didn't have the network. I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the amount of knowledge that I have now after having 3 very significant corporate roles in between. And now I've got a massive network. People are familiar with my work and what I do. People are willing to bring me in. That would not have happened had I just, kept slogging away and doing something that didn't work. So choose your pain. Which pain do you choose and what's motivating in that? And do you feel okay with it? And I'm still great. Carry on.
So what are your thoughts on people hiring for majors? How important do you think picking that major is for someone? Because I feel like a lot of students are like, I got to get the major right if I'm going to get the right job, but no one really knows what the right job is. So thoughts on picking a major and how stuck you are with that once you've chosen it.
Yeah. I mean, I say this as someone who holds degrees in political science and Latin American studies for both undergrad and grad school. And I don't do anything related to Latin American policy or economics at this stage in my life. So I would say the farther away from school you get, the less important the degree is. Okay. It's just important that you have a degree. For college, I understand the pressure. Maybe just do your gen eds. Get your gen eds out of the way because that fuels the curiosity, right? Taking English, you're taking science, you're taking foreign language, you might take a business class and start paying attention to the classes that are energizing you and the classes that are drawing away. That being said, I understand from a practical standpoint, there are people who are just I want a business degree because it is a clear-cut thing. And I know that there is this criticism of, the social sciences and things like that now, but those are still skills that are transferable. So I would still pay attention to what types of tasks energize you, what types of tasks stress you. Are you enjoying reading, writing, researching? It doesn't matter the major. Those are great skills to possess and take into the workplace. Whereas if you aren't great at that, but in your science and math classes, you could do it with your eyes closed. Those are great skills to transfer. Yeah. So use your runway. You don't have to have your major picked out on your first day of college. Get your gen eds out of the way and figure it out from there because you're going to start meeting more people, having more conversations, engage your professors. Chances are they work in that industry or close to that industry. Get them insight. And even if you pick something and you're like, now what? It's still not the end of it. I know it feels very big in that moment, but it's still not the end of the world because you have grad school, you can build your career, you could go to technical school, you can upskill. There is always a way. I often use the analogy, you're in a room, you've got multiple doors and windows, you're focused on the door, but there's another door you could use, there's a window, there's a trap door in the floor. Like there are different ways to get to the final destination. So don't get so glommed on that you're paralyzed and not doing anything in terms of forward motion.
Yeah. So one other question I thought was interesting. You've done both nonprofit and for-profit job. And a lot of people are like, nonprofit is really much more fulfilling because you're working for a cause. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that there are opportunities to be of service regardless of the industry that you work in. And that has always been my mindset. I had a mentor in the Foreign Service who would say, leave the place better than you found it. And that is something that I take into every single job that I have, regardless of industry. It's an attitude that I carry in my business. So I don't think that it's like nonprofits are good because they're nonprofits and corporate is bad because they're revenue generating. And then I would encourage you to think about the values or the work that you're doing, even if the company values are you're very detached from them. Like I worked at very large organizations. So, you've got the big umbrella values, but like, what's the work that your team is doing? Do you feel good about that? Or does that make you feel not good inside? Is that okay? Some people don't care. I don't know if you've watched Industry. I just binged it on HBO. Like that. I care. There's just like, I want to make a lot of money and it's not important to them. Other people, they want to earn money and they want to feel good about how they're earning that money. But I don't think that nonprofits are the only way that you can do work that makes you feel good inside.
I would totally agree. So that's nice to get your perspective on that. If you had some parting words for young people just at the beginning of their career, what words of advice do you have to offer?
So I have two things. One is something that I heard from Marie Forleo years ago. And she basically says that fear is just an energy. And once you can harness that energy, you can get it to do what you want it to do. So anytime I feel myself like, I'm scared, I'm anxious. It's like, okay, I'm acknowledging that. I'm scared, I'm anxious, but that means that it's important to me. It's something that I care about. So how can I get the outcome that I desire? So not necessarily running away from that feeling, but how you bottle it up and direct it to where you need it to go is one thing. And then the other is you have time. It doesn't feel like it when you're 17, 21, 30, but you have time. And most decisions that you make aren't going to be catastrophic. They feel like they will be, but they won't. So if you decide you want to go back to school, you want to quit that job, you want to be a beginner again and have an internship, that's okay. If you're making a value-aligned strategic action, it's okay. It's a jumble gym. You'll climb back up or you'll climb back down when you feel like it. You have time.
That is wonderful advice. And I have so enjoyed having you on the show. Can you just tell us the name of your career coaching business and where people could reach out to you if they're interested?
Absolutely. I always love new people who want to get aligned with their career and, create the career that they desire. So you can find me at KashiaDunner.com. My business is just Kashia Dunner Consulting. I'm also on Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok, all same name. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. Our goal is to help listeners discover meaningful careers that bring them joy and purpose. If you have a friend who might benefit from today's discussion with Kashia, and let's be honest, who wouldn't benefit from hearing Kashia's career advice? Please share this episode with them. Want even more career insights? Join our community at getcareercurious.com for exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access of this podcast that you won't find anywhere else. Thank you again for joining me, Marita McCahill, in this episode of Get Career Curious. I'll see you next time.